Today we're going to be comparing the Hoka One One RINCON to the New Balance Beacon version 2. What is up guys, Andy Forest Runner here and welcome back to another video. And today, as I said in the intro, we're going to be comparing the Hoka One One RINCON versus the New Balance Beacon version 2. As always with these videos, we're going to be going through the technical specifications, what my preference of shoe is out of these two, but most importantly, the question that a lot of you guys have been asking in the comments, in particular of the RINCON's video, how are these shoes holding up after a certain amount of mileage? Of course, if you didn't know, these shoes have very limited rubber outsole on them, and of course, wear and tear is to be expected a heck of a lot quicker. So we'll be answering all those questions today. If you're excited for the video, make sure you hit that like button, share it with your friends, and of course, do consider subscribing to the channel if you are new here. And without further ado, let's dive in. Right guys, so let's jump straight into the technical side of things, and before we do, let me just tell you that the Beacon for me has 61 miles in it and the RINCON has 108, so there's about a 50-mile difference between these two shoes. I have had the Beacon less times, but I am trying to play a bit of catch up with this thing to get some more mileage in. It's pretty sharpish. That's going to come into play later on when we talk about the sort of wear and tear on the bottom of the shoes and my personal overall opinion. Of course, don't forget, chime in the comments below with your thoughts if you have run in either of these two shoes and if you have a preference. So if we work our ways, as always in these comparison videos, from heel down to toe, midsole, outsole, and we'll go from there. So in terms of the Beacon here, we have a very thin heel counter area with the padded kind of cushioning around the ankle bone. In terms of everything, obviously we've got that heel flare that New Balance have used in both the Propel and the Beacon and probably other shoes this year. They're really loving it, whereas the RINCON doesn't have that. And that material around the heel flare and a lot of this around the whole heel area, bar those padded areas around the ankle bone, is very thin. It's nice, no issues. Very, very good. In terms of the RINCON, it's a bit more plush, a bit more cushioning all the way around. Gives for a much more softer feeling when you slip your foot into the shoe. In terms of the tongues, both of the tongues of these shoes are what I would class as a medium thickness tongue. They're not those wafer thin tongues that you can get on some shoes, but they're not those ultra thick tongues that you sometimes find on Asics shoes in particular, just as an example. They're kind of literally the perfect middle balance of the two. In terms of moving down to the laces, lovely simple lacing system. No qualms here, no issues. Both these shoes I can get tied down, locked down, really, really nice, dialed in fit. No issues in terms of laces coming loose. It's what you need. There's nothing worse than buying a new pair of shoes and seeing that a company is trying to do something fancy or faffing around with the lacing area. You just don't need that. When you're running, you want to know that your shoes are locked down nicely and intact. That is what these two shoes do very, very well. If we move on to the top of these shoes, the Hoka RINCON uses a breathable mesh upper, and I believe it's just kind of one layer all the way around. Of course, we've got the cushioning around the back area, but when you get down to the front of the toe box area, it is very, very thin. For me, I can see right through into the shoe through this mesh, and although it looks like you can pinch the mesh and there's a lot of movement here, you really don't feel like when you're running in it that you have any excess material here at all. You get such a good fit in the RINCON. It's absolutely brilliant. And of course, moving back to the Beacon, again, another circular knit upper along the top here with breathable, what I would call vents in the top, the holes all the way around here. But of course, I believe this is a two-piece upper because you've got this lighter blue area here with the hexagonal patterns on at the back, which is more cushioned. In terms of these hexagonal pods are cushioning, and then of course at the front here, again, very, very thin material. Again, you can grab it, but the fit is brilliant. There's no extra material on there, and that is absolutely fantastic. And then of course, Moving on to the midsole and outsole of these shoes. This is where I wanted to compare these shoes in particular to show you wear and tear degradation. I have to apologise, they are quite muddy. They have been out on the trails around where I live. But of course, as you can see on both of these shoes, both manufacturers have said that they have left the midsole exposed on the bottom and put rubber outsole on this one, rubber pods as they call it on the website, in the high wear and tear areas. And again, a couple of areas on here, the yellow foam, as you can see, which is for the high wear areas. But the rest of it is just pure exposed midsole, both of which seem to be holding out okay, but we'll get more into that in a minute. In terms of the differences between the two, the Rincon, they're both on the stiff side. You know, I'm just going to get that out there now. The Beacon 2, if you've watched any of my videos, you'll know how I feel about this in terms of the stiffness of the shoe. I much prefer this thing on the shorter runs and the speed workouts. I get a much better response when I get a shorter, sharper, snappy shoe that is going to spring me off with a nice hard midsole. Again, this thing is harder. It's slightly softer than the Rincon in my opinion. I can feel it. It is slightly softer. And of course in this thing we have a Meta Rocker. Now, that does, I think, make a difference because this has been my go-to racing shoe of late and I've absolutely had a blast racing in it. And the cushioning in this midsole is just a little bit more forgiving than the Rincon. My feet certainly don't hurt as much when I'm running in this thing as I do in this thing over the longer runs. I've taken this thing in a fair few long runs now. So in terms of overall specifications, that is the comparison between the two. So that leads us on to what are my overall thoughts on these two shoes, comparing them, what do I use them for, which one do I prefer, and of course the outsole wear and tear. Let's talk about that. So in terms of the preferences, I used both of these shoes because they're very similar for the shorter, sharper workouts, the speed workouts. The difference between the two is I feel that I can use the Rincon a little bit more on the longer runs. So I've done, as I've just said in the previous clip, a fair few long runs in this thing. And I get on with it really, really well. I mean, this thing is just kind of like a bit of a jack of all trades, even though I certainly lean towards it if I'm going out on a Tuesday or a Thursday for some quick repeat workouts, like mile repeats, kilometre repeats, 400s, all of that stuff. I would instantly gravitate towards the Rincon, and I'm now starting to use the Beacon for that sort of thing as well. But the beauty of the Rincon for me personally is not only can I do that in it, but of course I can do all my easy runs and I can do the long runs. Like if you're wanting a shoe that can do everything, this is the shoe. But of course, you mustn't forget about the whole outsole, lack of rubber, wear and tear type of issue. You're going to plough through this shoe very, very quickly, which is why I'm really grateful that I have the Beacon, so it's going to take some of the miles away from what I'm going to be using this thing in, or what I would normally use this thing for. In terms of preference, I've got to be honest, I'm Team Rincon all the way. This thing has been an absolute blast. In terms of the two, what would I pick over each other? It's going to be the Rincon. Like, as I said to you, I've raced in it, I've absolutely had a blast in it. It's such a comfortable shoe. I ran the half marathon PB, the 5k PB, and at the end of the half marathon my feet felt absolutely incredible. Like no burning on the bottom of my feet, no sore spots, no rubbing, nothing. It was absolutely phenomenal. Having said that, I am doing my best to wear this thing in, getting some more miles in it, hoping that the midsole in this is going to soften up. And I've got to be honest with you, I reached for this on my morning long run this week, my morning easy run this week, 6 miles in the Beacon on Monday morning. So it is a shoe that I'm starting to use a little bit more, and that means I'm going to be taking away some of the pressure from the Rincon. But overall, this thing wins. However, and this is a big selling point for the shoes, the outsole wear and tear, the midsole exposed midsole on the bottom. Now you can't see this very much because they are so muddy, but you're going to have to take my word for it. The Rincon really did start to sort of not disintegrate, but I saw lots of chunks and flakes of midsole foam coming off this thing at a very early stage. In the first 50 miles, this shoe sort of like shed its skin, almost like a snake. It's a weird thing to say, but there were lots of flakes coming off the bottom of it. Since the 50-mile mark, it's pretty much stayed as it is, but it did feel in the beginning like the Rincon was not going to get a lot of life out of it. I am pleased to say that after 108 miles, all of that sort of seems to have stopped, and it seems to have just been at a stable plateau now in terms of the top layer of skin, or the midsole we should say, has been removed, and now it's just as it is. I'm really pleased to say that when you see a lot of the midsole foam here, there's not many crinkles in it, there's not much compression, which is a great thing to see, because you see in a lot of shoes, especially my Nike Pegasus 36 trail shoes, there's a lot of crinkles in this midsole here. You can see the foam compressing in that. In this thing, it's just not doing that. However, the Beacon, having so much exposed midsole, just the same as the Rincon, is not doing any of that. This is holding up really, really well. I've taken this on trails and roads, and I have not seen any chunks come out the bottom. I've not seen any flakes on it at all. And I guess that comes with the harder midsole. The harder foam, it's just holding up really well. If I had to say to you which one are you going to get more life out of, which I know is a question that a lot of you have asked, I think you're going to get more life out of the Beacon. If you're happy with a stiffer midsole, if you're happy with a firmer ride, this thing is going to go the distance. In the beginning, I was questioning whether I could get 300 miles out of the Rincon, and I believe I will. I'm certainly going to do my best to get 300 miles out of the Rincon, but I'm going to use it sparingly because I'm really enjoying using it for my racing shoes. But I think I'll get way more than 300 miles out of the Beacon, and that's interesting because both of them literally have exactly the same amount of rubber outsole on them. The rest is exposed midsole, and you know, the difference in that aspect is remarkable. And I guess that's the price you pay. In terms of having a better ride in the Hoka, there's going to be a trade-off for the fact that it seems to be deteriorating a little bit quicker. There's always a trade-off with these things, but for the price point, $104.99, $80.99, that's a £25 difference, and you're going to get better use out of this thing. So in terms of overall thoughts, for me, preference-wise, this is the shoe that I will always gravitate to. However, if you're looking for bang for your buck, if you're looking for longevity, this is the shoe that I think you're going to get more out of. So there we go, that is the comparison between the Hoka Rincon and the New Balance Beacon version 2. I hope you enjoyed it, and of course, any comments, leave them in the description below, or any comments, leave them in the comment section below, I should say. If you've run in them, let me know, and let me know your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video today, guys, please make sure you give it a like, share it with your friends, and of course do consider subscribing to the channel for weekly running content, and I'll see you next time for more running videos. Until then.